Hey there. Do you wish your husband would take the spiritual leadership in your home? Are you feeling disconnected from him because you don't have that spiritual interaction with him? I'm Jenny from Love More to Live, where we talk about relationships, and today we're answering the question, what to do when your husband doesn't take the spiritual leadership in your home. And we're going to look at 6 things that you can do to help your husband get involved spiritually. Let me start off by saying, I so know how you feel because I've been there. Many years ago when our kids were small, Richard didn't take the spiritual leadership in our home, and I did worship with our kids every night on my own, and it was lonely and it was a burden that was heavy to carry, and it was hard. I longed for him to take up the leadership, and I tried all the nagging and the reminding and the you're supposed to do this and it's your role and all of that, and nothing helped. What I didn't know was that he was actually feeling inadequate, and also he had never grown up in a home where his father led out in spiritual things. And so he didn't have that example, and he didn't feel like he could do it as well as I could, because I could read well to the kids and I could sing to them, and they would interact with me, and when he tried to do it, it just didn't seem to go down very well. So what can you do to help your husband become the spiritual leader in your home? Well, before we jump into what you can do, let me remind you that you cannot force someone to be spiritual. You cannot force someone to take up a role that they should be taking up. That is something that has to come from within them, a conviction of their own heart that God is putting on their heart. And so you have to allow your husband the freedom to be led by God and not be his conscience and not be his spiritual guide and put him under pressure to fulfill this role. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a conversation, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But you are not there to be his conscience or to tell him how he should fulfill his role. Right, so how can you influence your husband? Number 1, and this has to do more with you than with him, this is cast your burden upon the Lord. It's a burden that you have to carry because your husband is not carrying it, but cast that burden on the Lord and let him carry it for you. Psalm 55 verse 22 says, cast thy burden upon the Lord and he will sustain you. Cast your burden on the Lord and allow him to carry the weight of the spiritual leadership in your home. Yes, you will still be his instrument fulfilling that role, but let God carry the weight of it. Don't resent having to carry that responsibility. See it as a privilege until your husband is ready to take up that work. Number 2, continue the spiritual leadership for your kids' sake. At least someone's doing it. Better to have you doing it than no one at all. So let your husband know that anytime he wants to take over the role, you'll step back happily. But don't allow him to become comfortable with you doing it. So somewhere along the line, you may have to actually challenge your husband and say to him, would you be willing to take over this role? Would you be willing to step up and take the leadership in our family? It's a burden for me, and I don't want to have to continue doing it. It's a balance, a fine balance there, where you're going to have to continue doing it, but you don't want to just take it over forever. You want him to be able to have that leadership role back when he's ready to take it up. Number 3, pray for your husband. And please note, I said pray for your husband, not about your husband. There's a big difference. When you pray about your husband, you're rehearsing what he's not doing. You're rehearsing the fact that he's not taking the spiritual leadership. He's not connecting with you spiritually. He's not praying with you He's not praying with you as a couple. He's not praying in the family. He's not doing all this. And you're rehearsing all of this stuff. And all it's going to do is it's going to make you feel more negative about him. So pray for him and ask God to do what he sees best is for what is best for your husband. And what God sees what is best, and what God sees what your husband needs, is not necessarily what you see he needs. Taking the spiritual leadership in your home may be further down on God's list for your husband than it is on your list. So allow God the freedom to work in your husband's life, and just pray for him that God will work in his heart. Number 4, don't nag or pout. Nagging only makes things worse, And it was not going to motivate your husband to take up the leadership role. In fact, it's going to make him resent you. It's going to make him resent the whole situation, and he's going to actually distance himself from you even more. So nagging's not the thing. Pouting's even worse, because it makes you nurse your grievance internally. Oh, he doesn't do this, and I wish he would, and why can't he? And all it does is brew a nice toxic resentment in your heart, which is going to come out in other areas of your relationship. So your spouse's good points will begin to fade from your view, and all you'll be able to see is the negatives about him. So don't pout. It's only going to make you miserable and affect your whole entire relationship. Number 5, don't complain about him to your friends or to your sister or to your mom or to anyone. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go to someone for advice and for counsel because you're wanting help, but don't just talk about your husband and what he's not doing to anyone else. It creates a negative impression of your husband in your own mind, but also in the minds of your family and your friends, and that will affect how you all see him and how you relate to him. So be careful what you say and who you say it to. And then number 6, present your case. Tell your husband that you want to discuss something important with him, and ask him when would be a good time for you to have that discussion. Present your need for spiritual leadership in your home gently. Don't attack, don't accuse him. You never do this, you never do that. Why don't you? I wish you would. Speak from your heart. Present your case from your perspective. This is how it makes me feel when you don't take the leadership. I really wish you would. It's a burden that I'm feeling is very heavy for me, and I need you to help me carry it. There's a way of presenting your case that's gonna help him, instead of getting his hackles up and resisting your approach to him. So tell him clearly what you need from him and why. And then once you've done this, once you've started to put all of these points into practice and nothing changes, then there's not a whole lot you can do except go back to number 1 and do number 1 to 5. Let's just review them quick. And that is casting your burden upon the Lord, continue the spiritual leadership in your home, keep praying for your husband and not about him, don't nag and pout, cultivate cheerfulness and happiness in the way that you relate to him. Don't complain about him to your friends. But most of all, up your prayers for him, because it is a spiritual battle, and it's something that must come from within, in your husband's own heart. So I wish you the best. I want to encourage you, though, that when your husband does take over the leadership role, be encouraging, support him, even if he doesn't do it as well as you do. Help him in any way you can, and make him feel that he is doing a good job, because it may well be that, like in my case, that he's feeling inadequate and he just doesn't know how to relate to your kids, especially if they're small. Very often men just don't know how to relate to little kids, and that's something that they have to learn to do, and it's difficult for them. But you can help them and support them. You can help your husband and support your husband. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please click the like button, subscribe, and click the bell so that you can get notifications of future videos. And please, if you have a question on anything to do with relationships, leave a comment below or send us an email. The links in the email address is in the box below, and get to us and we'll make a video that answers your question.